Welcome to our deep dive, everyone. We're tackling dark psychology today.
Ooh, fun.
Yeah, should be interesting. Our listener wrote in and specifically wanted more on this topic
Great.
and sent us this book called Dark Psychology Secrets. I think it's like the essential guide to persuasion, manipulation,
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah, all that good stuff.
Yeah, so that's by Daniel James Hollins.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it's pretty fascinating already just from like the intro.
Yeah, it really gets you thinking, It starts off by saying that everyone
Yeah.
has the potential for, dark behavior.
It's true, though.
I mean,
like, true.
We all have those thoughts, right? It's not like we're all villains or anything. But it's those little things we probably wouldn't want to admit to.
Oh, absolutely. And like, I was thinking about this as I was reading through it. I was like,
Yeah.
I'm sure there are things
Totally.
that I've thought about or done
Yeah.
that fall into this category.
And the author uses this really interesting example to illustrate the point. Like, picture this: a wealthy man who gets enjoyment out of kicking a dog.
Okay.
Just for fun. No reason for his cruelty. He's not lacking anything.
Just being mean.
It's just pure darkness.
Yeah.
Right. So it kind of points to that potential for darkness that exists in all of us.
So if like, we all have that potential, like where's the line then? Like how do we know?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
Right? Because how do we differentiate between just having a thought
Yeah.
and then actually acting on it in a manipulative way?
Exactly.
That's where it gets tricky.
So is that what this book is about? Like, is it helping us find that line?
It kind of presents it like a spectrum,
Yeah.
Like on one end, you've got those fleeting dark thoughts that we all have.
Uh-huh.
On the other, you've got the truly horrific acts that thankfully most of us would never even consider.
Right.
And somewhere in between those two extremes, that's where you find those everyday manipulation tactics that we encounter,
Yeah.
sometimes without even realizing it.
Oh, yeah, and those tactics are everywhere, right? I mean, like, you think about,
Absolutely.
like, advertising politics, even, like, in our relationships with people, like, how often are we being manipulated without even realizing it?
That's the scary part.
Yeah.
It's happening constantly, and most of us are completely unaware.
So then what, like, this book just tells us all about how we're being manipulated, and that's it?
Oh, no, it goes way deeper than that.
Yeah, okay.
It breaks down the how and the why behind these tactics.
Okay.
It explains the psychology behind them so you can start to recognize those patterns.
Okay, I like that.
So one really fascinating concept the book talks about is this thing called problem, reaction, solution.
Interesting name.
Yeah, right? It's like a 3-step recipe for manipulation.
Okay, tell me more.
Okay, so first, you create a problem.
Mm-hmm.
It could be real or imagined, doesn't really matter.
Okay.
The point is to trigger a strong reaction in people to get them riled up.
Okay, got it.
Then, when everyone's freaking out and looking for answers, that's when you swoop in with your pre-planned solution.
Like the hero.
Exactly. You control the narrative from start to finish.
It's scary how effective that can be, though, right? Like, if people are genuinely afraid or uncertain.
Absolutely. It preys on our vulnerabilities.
So is this like a real thing? Like, do people actually do this?
Oh, yeah. There are tons of examples throughout history.
Give me one.
I mean, think about, how certain social rights have been eroded over time.
Okay.
It often starts with seemingly small concessions, but those concessions eventually add up to major shifts in power.
And most people don't even notice it happening until it's too late.
Exactly.
So, like, how do we protect ourselves then? Like, it feels like we're just like pawns in this game.
Well, that's the thing, right? We have to become aware of the game being played.
Okay.
And that's what the book helps us do. It shines a light on those tactics so we can start to recognize the patterns.
Okay, so it's like learning the rules so we can play the game better.
In a way, yes, but it's more about being able to spot those manipulations and make informed choices.
Okay.
Like one common method is called gradually increasing changes.
What's that?
So it's basically this idea that you can make unacceptable things acceptable over time.
Yep.
By slowly increasing exposure to them. So it's like boiling a frog.
Okay. Yeah.
If you throw it in hot water, it'll jump out.
Right.
But if you gradually increase the temperature, it won't notice until it's too late.
That's a little terrifying.
It is. And that's how manipulation can work. It slowly chips away at our boundaries and our critical thinking.
Okay, so being aware of these tactics is a good first step. But is there anything else we can do?
Oh, yeah, there are a bunch of other things the book talks about.
Like what?
Well, think about, using loaded language, appealing to our desire to fit in,
Oh, yeah.
making us feel guilty for questioning authority. All of these things are designed to bypass our rational thinking and tap into our emotions.
That's so sneaky. Like, we don't even realize it's happening.
Right. It's like our emotions are being hijacked.
Okay, now I have a question about this.
Okay.
So the book also talks about hypnosis.
Oh, yeah. That's a whole other rabbit hole.
And it makes it sound like hypnosis can be used for both good and bad.
Absolutely. I mean, there's stage hypnosis, which is basically entertainment, right?
Yeah, like those shows where they make people cluck like chickens.
Exactly. And then there's hypnotherapy, which aims to access the subconscious mind for therapeutic purposes.
So like helping people quit smoking or overcome phobias.
Right. But the underlying principle is the same, bypassing our conscious defenses to influence our thoughts and behaviors.
Okay, so is hypnosis like real then? Or is it all just a bunch of tricks?
Oh, it's definitely real.
Really?
Yeah. The book even gives an example of how parents can unintentionally hypnotize their kids.
Oh, that's interesting.
It's like with a simple warning and a negative suggestion.
Like how?
Okay, imagine a kid carrying a glass of milk,
Okay.
and the parent says, "Don't drop that," with that stern, authoritative voice.
Okay, I can picture it.
Of course, the kid spills the milk, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And then comes the negative suggestion. "See, you're so clumsy, you'll never learn."
I see.
It's subtle, but those repeated messages can really impact a child's self-belief.
So it's almost like they're planting those seeds of self-doubt in their subconscious.
Exactly.
Mm.
And that's why it's so important to be mindful of the language we use, especially with children.
That makes me think about the power of words in general.
Yeah.
Like how they can influence our thoughts and behaviors, especially when we're in a heightened emotional state.
And that leads perfectly into the book's discussion of NLP, or neuro-linguistic programming.
What's that?
It explores how language can be used to reprogram the mind.
For better or worse?
For better or worse, exactly.
Yeah.
But it can be a really powerful tool for positive change if used correctly.
I like that.
Like one technique that stood out to me was anchoring. Have you ever heard of that?
I don't think so.
So it's this idea that you can associate a specific touch or action with a desired feeling or state. Like think about a song that instantly transports you back to a specific memory.
Oh, yeah, I get that.
And it floods you with emotion, right?
Absolutely.
That's anchoring in action. Our minds are constantly making these associations.
So if we can understand those connections, we can actually rewire our brains to respond differently.
Exactly. It's all about recognizing those patterns and using them to our advantage.
That's pretty cool. So we've talked about manipulation, hypnosis, NLP.
Oh, yeah.
Is there anything else this book covers?
Oh, yeah. We haven't even gotten to persuasion yet.
Okay, so what's the difference? Like, how is persuasion different from manipulation?
So the book defines persuasion as a symbolic process where communicators try to convince others to change their attitudes or behaviors.
Okay, that sounds a lot like manipulation to me.
Well, it can be, right?
Yeah.
The key difference is intent.
Oh, I see.
Like true persuasion should be ethical and transparent. It's about presenting information in a way that allows people to make informed decisions.
So like in ancient Greece, where they focused on open debate and the pursuit of truth.
Exactly. That's the ideal.
Okay.
But sadly, a lot of modern persuasion techniques have strayed from those ethical roots.
Yeah, it feels like it's less about truth and more about winning no matter what.
It's true. And the book argues that this shift has made us more vulnerable to manipulation because we're constantly bombarded with persuasive messages that appeal to our emotions, our fears, our desires.
It's like we're being played all the time and we don't even realize it.
It can feel that way, right?
Yeah.
Especially when you start to see those patterns everywhere.
Okay, so knowing that this is happening, how can we protect ourselves? Like, what are some concrete steps we can take?
Well, one of the first steps is to become aware of our own cognitive biases.
What are those?
They're like mental shortcuts our brains use to make decisions quickly,
Okay.
but they can also make us vulnerable to manipulation.
Can you give me an example?
Sure, like the scarcity principle.
Okay.
We're more likely to buy something if we think it's the last one or a sale is ending soon.
Oh, yeah, I've totally fallen for that before.
It plays on our fear of missing out, so we make impulsive decisions.
That's so true. So understanding those biases can help us resist those persuasive tactics.
Absolutely. It's about becoming more conscious consumers and making informed choices.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here.
Yeah.
We've talked about dark psychology, manipulation tactics, hypnosis, NLP, and persuasion. I feel like my brain is about to explode.
I know, right? It's a lot to take in.
But it's so fascinating. I want to know more.
Well, that's what we're here for. In the next part of our deep dives, we'll explore how these tactics play out in real-world scenarios,
Oh, okay.
like in relationships, in the workplace, even in cults.
Oh, wow. That's going to be intense.
It is. But it's important to understand the full spectrum of manipulation so we can protect ourselves and those we care about.
I can't wait to hear more.
Well, stay tuned for the next part of our deep dive.
All right, everyone, we'll be right back after a short break.
See you soon.
Okay, so we're back and ready to dive deeper into these manipulative tactics.
Yeah, let's get into the nitty-gritty of how this stuff plays out in real life.
Right, because like knowing about it in theory is one thing,
Yeah,
but seeing how it actually affects us, that's where it gets real.
absolutely. And one area where these tactics are often used is in relationships,
Oh yeah, for sure.
both personal and professional.
Like I've definitely seen that firsthand.
It can be subtle, but once you start to recognize the patterns, it's like a light bulb goes off.
Okay, so give me an example.
So let's say you're in a relationship and your partner constantly denies your reality.
Ooh, that's a bad sign.
Right, like they twist your words or make you feel like you're overreacting.
Yeah, I've heard of that. What's it called again?
That's called gaslighting.
Gaslighting, right?
Yeah, and it's a classic manipulation tactic.
Okay, so what's the goal of gaslighting? Like, what's the manipulator trying to achieve?
It's all about undermining your confidence and making you doubt your own perceptions.
So, like, making you question your own sanity.
Exactly. They want you to become dependent on their version of events.
So they can control you.
Exactly. It's a very insidious form of manipulation.
It's like they're slowly chipping away at your sense of self.
And that's why it can be so damaging, especially in long-term relationships.
Okay, so gaslighting is one tactic. What are some other ways that manipulation can show up in relationships?
Well, think about emotional blackmail,
Okay.
where someone uses threats or guilt trips to get what they want.
Oh, yeah, I know people who do that all the time.
It's a way of preying on your empathy.
And your desire to avoid conflict.
Right. You don't want to upset them, so you give in to their demands.
It's like they're holding your emotions hostage.
And it can be tough to stand up for yourself in those situations.
Especially if you're already feeling vulnerable or insecure.
Exactly. So it's important to recognize those power dynamics that can exist in relationships.
So how do we do that? Like, how can we spot those red flags early on and protect ourselves?
Self-awareness is key, I think. The more you understand your own vulnerabilities, the better equipped you are to recognize when someone might be trying to exploit them.
So, like, if I know that I'm a sucker for a sob story, I can be extra cautious when someone starts laying on the guilt trip.
Yeah, exactly. You become more conscious of your triggers and less likely to react impulsively.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, what about the workplace?
Oh, the workplace can be a whole other minefield.
I can imagine, like, office politics and competition for promotion.
It's a breeding ground for manipulation, for sure.
So, give me some examples of how these dark psychology tactics can play out in a work environment.
Well, think about like a boss who uses intimidation or micromanagement to keep their employees in line.
Oh, yeah, I've had bosses like that.
It creates a culture of fear where people are afraid to speak up or challenge authority.
So it's like they're using their power to silence dissent.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it stifles creativity and innovation.
Okay, what else?
Think about the colleague who takes credit for other people's work.
That's so frustrating.
Right. They use charm and manipulation to climb the corporate ladder, stepping on anyone who gets in their way.
It's like they're playing a game where the only rule is to win, no matter who gets hurt.
And unfortunately, those tactics often work.
Yeah, it seems like dishonesty and manipulation are often rewarded in those cutthroat environments.
Which is why it's so important to not only recognize those tactics, but also have the courage to call them out when you see them happening.
Yeah, but speaking truth to power can be intimidating.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's necessary to break those cycles of manipulation.
And create a healthier, more ethical workplace.
Exactly. Now, the book also touches on a more extreme form of manipulation.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting.
Cults.
Cults, wow, that's a whole other level.
It is, and it's a stark reminder of how powerful these tactics can be.
So how do cults use manipulation to recruit and control members?
Well, they often prey on people who are feeling lost or vulnerable.
People who are seeking a sense of belonging or purpose?
Right, and they offer this compelling ideology, a charismatic leader to follow, and a tight-knit community.
So it's like they're fulfilling a deep psychological need.
Exactly, but at a high cost.
Because once someone's drawn in, the manipulation really kicks in, right?
Absolutely, and the tactics can be incredibly sophisticated.
Like what?
Well, there's isolation from friends and family.
So they become completely dependent on the group.
Right, and then there's sleep deprivation, which makes people more suggestible.
Wow, that's messed up.
And then there's constant reinforcement of the group's beliefs through indoctrination and propaganda.
So they're basically brainwashing people.
In a way, yes. It's a systematic process of breaking down a person's sense of self and replacing it with the group's ideology.
It's chilling to think about how these tactics can be used to control people's minds.
It is, but before we move on to discussing strategies for protecting ourselves, I want to emphasize something important.
Okay.
Not all manipulation is malicious.
Wait, what do you mean?
Not everyone who uses these tactics is a villain twirling their mustache.
So you're saying there are good manipulators?
No, not exactly. But sometimes people manipulate unconsciously.
Okay.
Like they may have learned these behaviors from their families
Okay, yeah, I can see that.
or by observing others. It might even be a defense mechanism they developed to cope with difficult situations.
So it's not always intentional.
Right. It doesn't excuse the behavior, of course, but it adds another layer of complexity to this discussion.
So how do we separate the intentional manipulation from those unconscious patterns?
That's where discernment comes in.
Okay.
It's about observing patterns of behavior, paying attention to how someone makes you feel, and trusting your gut instincts.
So it's like being a detective in our own lives.
Exactly. You're gathering evidence and looking for clues to determine whether someone's actions are genuine or manipulative.
Okay, so let's talk about those practical strategies for protection.
Yeah, let's get into that.
Because we've talked about all these scary tactics, but what can we actually do to safeguard ourselves?
Well, we touched on this earlier, but building self-awareness is crucial.
Okay, remind me how that helps.
The more you understand your own vulnerabilities, the better equipped you are to recognize when someone might be trying to exploit them.
So, like, knowing my weaknesses so I can strengthen my defenses.
Exactly. Like if you know you're easily swayed by flattery, you can be extra cautious when someone starts buttering you up.
Right, because it might be a sign that they're trying to manipulate me.
Exactly. So self-awareness is like that first line of defense.
Okay, what else can we do?
Developing critical thinking skills is also essential.
Okay, so how does that play into protecting ourselves from manipulation
Critical thinking helps you evaluate information objectively.
instead of just accepting things at face value?
Right. You're questioning assumptions, looking for evidence, and considering different perspectives.
It's like being a scientist for your own life.
Exactly. You're not just blindly following the crowd or believing everything you hear,
You're thinking for yourself.
and that's a powerful antidote to manipulation.
Okay, so self-awareness, critical thinking, what else?
Setting clear boundaries is crucial.
Boundaries. Okay.
Knowing what you're willing to tolerate and what you're not,
Right.
and communicating those boundaries clearly and assertively.
So it's not about being aggressive.
No, it's about being respectful but firm.
Okay.
It's about standing up for yourself and saying no when someone is overstepping,
Even if it's uncomfortable.
especially if it's uncomfortable, because your well-being is paramount.
Okay, that's a good reminder. Now, the book also talks about trusting your gut instincts.
Oh yeah, that inner voice is a powerful tool.
But sometimes it's hard to know whether to trust it, right? Like, what if it's just my anxiety talking?
Well, that's where discernment comes in again.
Okay.
It's about learning to differentiate between those intuitive whispers that are trying to protect you and those that are based on fear or insecurity.
So it's like honing that inner compass.
Exactly. And the more you practice listening to your gut, the more attuned you'll become to its wisdom.
So if something feels off, it probably is.
Don't ignore those red flags or dismiss your feelings.
Okay, so we've talked about individual strategies
Yeah.
like self-awareness, critical thinking, boundaries, intuition.
hmm
Is there anything else we can do to protect ourselves from manipulation?
I think it's also crucial to surround yourself with people who support and empower you,
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
like having a strong network of friends, family, or mentors.
People who have your best interests at heart.
Exactly. They can provide a reality check when you're feeling confused or manipulated.
So, like, if I'm in a relationship where I'm questioning my own sanity, my friends can be like, hey, something's not right here.
Right. They can validate your experiences and give you the strength to stand up for yourself.
It's like having a team of cheerleaders in your corner reminding you of your worth.
Exactly. And that support system can make all the difference in navigating those tricky situations.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground in this part of our deep dive.
Yeah, we've been through a lot.
We've seen how these dark psychology tactics can play out in real life, and we've explored strategies for recognizing and protecting ourselves from manipulation.
It's been quite a journey.
So what's next for us in this exploration of the human psyche?
Well, in the final part of our deep dive, we're going to shift our focus a bit.
Okay.
We're going to explore how we can use this knowledge of psychology in a more positive way.
Ooh, I like that. So instead of just focusing on the dark side, we're going to look at the light.
Exactly. We'll explore how to create more authentic connections, communicate more effectively, and maybe even inspire positive change in others.
I can't wait.
We'll stay tuned for the final part of our deep dive into the fascinating world of psychology.
All right, everyone, we'll be right back after a short break. Okay, so we're back. And I gotta say, my head is spinning a little bit after all that.
Yeah, it's a lot to process, right? Like all these manipulation tactics and how to recognize them and protect ourselves and
But honestly, I feel more like empowered than like freaked out.
good. That's exactly the point.
Hmm.
You know, it's not about becoming paranoid or suspicious of everyone.
Yeah, I don't want to like walk around thinking everyone's trying to manipulate me all the time.
Right, exactly. It's more about like just being aware of the possibilities and developing that discernment so you can navigate those situations with more confidence.
So, like, instead of assuming everyone has an ulterior motive,
Right.
it's more about like having that inner radar that says, something feels a little off here.
Exactly. And like any skill discernment takes practice. The more you pay attention to those subtle cues, those gut feelings,
Yeah.
the inconsistencies in someone's words and actions, the better you'll become at recognizing those red flags.
It's like building those mental muscles we talked about before.
Yeah, yeah,
The more we use them, the stronger they get.
exactly.
And I think it's important to remember that even when we do encounter manipulative behavior,
Right.
we're not helpless victims.
Absolutely.
Like, we have a choice
You always have a choice.
in how we respond.
Yeah.
Exactly. You can choose how you want to engage, whether to set boundaries or disengage or even walk away from a situation altogether.
I think sometimes walking away is the healthiest choice.
It definitely can be, even if it's difficult.
Yeah.
You know, protecting your own well-being is paramount.
That's a good reminder.
Okay.
Okay, so the book doesn't really talk about this,
Okay.
but I think it's super relevant today.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how has technology amplified the potential for manipulation?
Oh my gosh, in so many ways. I mean, think about social media for a second.
Yeah.
Those algorithms, those things are designed to keep us hooked.
Right. They show us what they think we want to see.
Exactly. And that creates these echo chambers where we're only exposed to information that confirms our existing beliefs.
It's like being trapped in a bubble,
Yeah, where
Yeah.
everyone agrees with you all the time.
which feels good sometimes.
Oh, yeah, it's totally comfortable. But it also prevents us from seeing the bigger picture, you know, and from engaging with different perspectives.
Which is so important for growth.
Absolutely.
Huh.
And then there's online advertising. Ugh, don't even get me started on those ads.
It's like they're reading our minds, right?
It's creepy. Like, how do they know? I was just thinking about buying a new pair of shoes.
That's targeted marketing at its finest. They're using our data, our browsing history, our likes and dislikes, to create these personalized ads that are specifically designed to appeal to our desires and our insecurities.
So it's like manipulation on steroids.
Pretty much.
So what can we do about it? Like, how do we protect ourselves from this kind of digital manipulation?
Well, for starters, being aware of it is a big step.
Okay.
Like, just knowing that these tactics are being used against us can help us be more critical of the information we consume.
So, like, don't believe everything you see on the internet.
Exactly. Do your own research.
Yeah.
Think for yourself. Question those ads that seem too good to be true.
And maybe take a break from social media every now and then.
Definitely. Digital detoxing can be so beneficial for your mental health and for your ability to think clearly.
Okay, so we've talked about the dark side of technology, but I think it's important to remember that technology can also be a force for good.
Oh, absolutely. It can be an incredible tool for education, connection, and empowerment.
So how can we use our understanding of psychology and technology to create a more positive world?
Well, for one thing, we can use technology to spread awareness about these manipulation tactics.
Yeah, like we're doing right now.
Exactly. We can educate people about how to recognize those patterns and protect themselves.
And we can use social media to connect with like-minded people and build communities that support critical thinking and ethical behavior.
Right. And we can use technology to amplify the voices of those who are fighting for positive change.
So it's not about rejecting technology altogether, but rather about using it in a conscious and ethical way.
Exactly. It's about harnessing the power of technology to create a world where people feel empowered, not manipulated.
I love that vision. So as we wrap up this deep dive into dark psychology, I'm feeling a mix of emotions.
I bet. There's a lot to take in.
But overall, I feel like this knowledge has been incredibly valuable. It's made me more aware of the subtle ways that people can influence each other.
And hopefully more resilient to those tactics.
Yeah, exactly. And it's also made me more appreciative of the power of genuine connection and authenticity.
That's beautiful. I love that takeaway. Because at the end of the day, it's those genuine connections that make life worth living.
Absolutely. So, to everyone listening out there, remember that knowledge is power. Keep learning, keep questioning, and keep choosing to connect with others in ways that feel real and fulfilling.
Beautifully said. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the fascinating world of dark psychology.
We hope you found it insightful and empowering. Until next time, stay curious and stay connected.